Okay, great. David Amerland, it's exciting to have you back. And we've got my business associate, Karen Teedy, here as well. And we're talking about semantic search and social media management. David, great to have you here.
It's a delight to be back, and so many things have happened since last time we connected, so I think it's absolutely timely, and there's a lot of things to actually discuss in that sphere.
Well, you know, there's probably about 50 conversations I want to have with you, but we have to do them one at a time. I'm sure you might have had a few in your head as well. So. But Karen, I just want to let you say hello, introduce yourself as well, and we'll start out. So.
Hi, David. Good to meet you in person.
Likewise, it's a pleasure.
Okay.
And so, of course, for anyone who doesn't know, you wrote the book on Google Semantic Search, and then you have a new one out on Hangout. And in the discussion today, I wanted to have is really about Karen and I offer at NC State Technology Training Solution a social media management certificate program, and we're always looking to keep our content and the advice we're giving the best possible. And you're, to me, one of my mentors and the one I respect in the domain of creating content in this new Google Hummingbird world, and creating semantic search, which I'm always working to learn more about. So that's what I want our discussion to be on today, and then we'll see what is next. But just to start with it, I just want to get your views on if you were going to, I'm going to take it this, if you had a family member or loved one in a class on that they were going to take on social media management to be able to manage accounts and doing it, what would be your first advice you'd give through the lens of Google Semantic Search and content today?
Okay, I mean, it all starts with the individual, really, and this is the biggest change we have had since semantic search came in. In the past, we could get away with essentially learning how to use specific tools and go into a blind mode of operating, and it would largely work for us. And it doesn't anymore, and it increasingly fails to do so. And the reason for that is it has to start with us as a basis. So really, if you're brand new to this and you're thinking, okay, where do I start from? It's a valid question. You need to start with an assessment of your own skills and competencies and your own comfort zone. Find out what you're good at. If you're using only...
You said it starts with tasks or us?
Us. It starts with us.
Right.
It has to start with an assessment of what are we good at, what do we know, and then it goes on to what do we want to achieve. And within these three simple questions, you have a very detailed, almost, map which is being created. Because essentially, if you realize what you're good at and what you can do, that becomes your first building block, and that allows you to then progress on to the next step, which will lead you to your end goal, whatever that may be. So that's a starting point. Understand what are you good at and how are you using that, and then really, whatever that may be your Twitter account or even your Facebook account or your Google Plus account, which will certainly be your Google Plus account, but there you go. Then you ask, okay, how do I then operate within that environment to allow a very detailed picture of me as an individual or me as a business to actually emerge? And by detailed, we're not talking about just the very specific intent of here's what I'm selling, here's how you can buy it, because that is no longer enough. We know that. It has to be an approach which essentially informs the character of your business, the character of who you are as a person, the voice, your interests, your values, your intent, what actually keeps you going, what makes you unique, what makes you, you. And once you sort of break down how you can project that, then you're onto a very good path without doing anything technical of essentially creating a very distinct identity in a semantic search world, which will increasingly surface you over anybody else who does something similar but hasn't taken that approach.
So we're working with people that are really learning to speak for an organization and speak for someone else in the domain of how do we make that authentic and
Yes.
a real representation, because the way I like to focus on it is you're to amplify the real voice of the business and bring it out here, not create something that has no authentic connection. So would you talk about that, because that's to me kind of a challenge,
Yes.
because you've got to kind of in some ways be them speaking.
Exactly. Okay, this is a brilliant question, because the moment we start saying bring in your identity and bring in your personality, be authentic, and then work for a business, it almost sounds like a disconnect. We're asking people to do two different things. And it's only a perception of that because for the last 10, 15 years in the online world, we have worked in a kind of disconnect. But if we forget the online world completely and we go into the offline world, we never stop working. What we do as people in a social environment, at home, with our friends, even down at the sports club, in very small degrees, is informed by what we do professionally. If you work for a car dealership, all your friends know about it. You don't go around handing out your business cards. They know that, when it comes to cars, you know what you're talking about. If you're working for a bakery, your friends know about it. They know that you know about bread. They will ask you a question, even though you don't always necessarily bring out, that 15 different types of grain that does these things. It doesn't come up unless it comes up. So really the challenge is, and it is a real challenge, Martin, I'm very glad you said that. When we go online, how do we achieve the same effect? Now the difference between offline and online is that online, our intent and our presence are more studied because we have made a conscious choice to be there, whereas offline we haven't. But that doesn't change the nature of the challenge, nor the nature of the solution. Essentially, when you're representing a business, you're not just representing a business in the online world, you're also bringing in your own reasons for representing that business. Why do you do it? Apart from that you need a job and you need to make money. We all do that. But beyond that, we also learn that a business does something which we buy into. It fires us up, it makes us excited, it resonates with our own sense of values and how we understand the world and our place in it. And all those things need to gradually come out. And as they do, then your own personality, which is why you're in that business, and the business itself, what does it do and how does it begin to come out in a very gradual but pervasive sort of way. And that's the win forward.
So, what you're saying to me is matching up the right social media management or inbound marketing person with the culture of the business is now more critical than ever. Otherwise, it's going to be harder to maintain that authentic voice of that business. Is that aligned with what you're saying?
It is, and again, you're making an incredibly valuable point. Ideally, always, a business gets the right person in the right job, and the right person finds the right kind of business to work for. We know that historically this hasn't always happened, and the reasons it hasn't happened is because, well, if it didn't, nobody would really get seriously hurt. As a business, you could afford to get somebody in to do a job. If they did it in a sort of half-hearted way, well, it didn't matter very much because they still did the minimum of what you expected, and you could always fire them and get somebody else in. And that made for a very lossy proposition in terms of the values we create, in terms of how we understand work should reflect what we really love to do or what we mostly love to do. And the work itself should actually, or the business we work in, should actually value our contribution into it. And it didn't really happen very much in the past, but now in a social media environment where it's entirely transparent and the connection allows these ties to be shown, then it becomes critical for the business to find the right person to fit in it, and for the right person to find a business that fits what they believe in and how they operate. So the moment we get a match like that, great things begin to happen.
Well, Karen, I want to give a minute. I can hear your brain over there working. I'm sure you have a question with this. So, Karen, you want to throw something in?
Don't. Martin, don't. Martin, please
Okay.
don't.
Oh, okay. In fact, the next piece of this to me is coming up is that when someone's hiring a social media manager or someone to work with them, value alignment is probably more critical than other jobs if we're going in that direction. because otherwise we're trying to get that person to become us, and the movement from who they are to where we are might be too great.
Yes, that is a critical distinction to make. And again, thanks for actually putting it like this. Value alignment is critical because it also helps create a shorter path to trust. And without trust, basically, you can't allow somebody to represent you in the online world without sort of risking the fact that they may get it wrong and it may not work for anybody. So really, that fit where the alignment of values between a person and the business is critical, and I think the moment it happens, everybody gains a lot more than what they supposed they would, which is great.
Now, one thing else I'm realizing is if the business hasn't made clear their vision and mission in a way that the average public could understand, or their values, then it's harder even for the employee to select it. And many usually, when we talked about it in our training about the importance of a vision and mission that isn't a document on a hard file that's not living, but something simple enough that the average person can grab and understand. These seem to be more important for me looking to work to build that should we work together relationship. What's your view on that?
Yes, definitely. I think, we talk about semantic search and the semantic web having created a more transparent, more granular approach, where the techniques we learn no longer work just as techniques if they're not also aligned to the people behind them, to their belief system and their value system. And what you said basically makes perfect sense within that, because essentially as a business, if you're looking to hire somebody to represent you and you have the expectation that they're going to be transparent, that their values are going to align with yours, that they're always going to work with the best interests of the business in mind, well, you are also duty bound to project that kind of idea, to support 100% that kind of belief system, and to be behind it at every step of the way. And if you don't, then you're only creating the disconnect, which is going to cause the problems you're going to face further down the line, which doesn't make any kind of sense. So really, now we're faced with a situation where it is the best interests of every business to be as transparent, truthful, supportive, open as possible, and then it makes it a lot easier to have the same expectations from their employees when they come online.
Something came up in one of our classes where they one of the businesses successfully worked with a reputation management business, and really a lot of it involved generating a lot of content for them. And I'm just curious, that looks like the kiss of death in a semantic world, to have something that might be generated at a larger scale, not connected to the true voice of the business. If we've got a search engine that to me is getting closer to artificial intelligence and going, that's not them, what's your view on something like that?
Exactly, your take is spot on. Again, we still see a lot of traditional businesses which are locked into traditional modes of working online and marketing to the masses. The reason they're still bound into that is because it is very difficult for a large business or for a very traditional business to change very quickly. Inevitably, they will change because they're all facing the same pressure. Certainly, businesses I see and businesses I talk to of pretty much every scale, from relatively small ones to absolutely global ones, they all realize that their target audience has changed in nature. They realize that audience is fast-moving, it is vocal, it is connected, and it is knowledgeable, which means that it becomes really hard to compartmentalize their marketing and hope that they are projecting the right kind of values. So they will change.
Excellent. Karen, I see a question in chat. That's great. Would you throw it? I just want to tell you, it's really exciting, David, because Karen and I are almost like a Mutt and Jeff sometimes. We have alignment and values, but very different perspectives on working, and that's, to me, the greatest blessing, because
yes,
I don't have her strengths and she doesn't have mine. So one of the things the class enjoys is, almost sometimes we'll be disagreeing in front of the room, and that to me is an authenticity. But Karen, would you like to ask that question? I think it's a great one.
Well, if you're looking for values alignment, it's easy to say, easy to pretend, and difficult to prove. So how would you test for values alignment if you were hiring someone to do this for you?
Okay, this is an excellent question, and it basically shows how far and how fast the hiring process has changed. You're quite right that we can say almost anything when we want a job, because we want a job, right? But
Martin can't tell you can spell, but otherwise, yeah.
the entire skill of the interviewing process and the interviewer is basically to sort through the people who are ideal for the position in a business and have the right fit. And the hiring process has gone through a very fast transformation in a semantic web. We are moving extremely quickly away from the traditional CV approach and the CV and the interview approach to actually mining a person's identity and personality on the web in order to find either corroborative evidence that they're the right fit or the opposite. And that also shows the importance that we need to place in terms of how we operate as people online. We are now essentially entities. We're full-blown personalities. Our digital identities project our physical ones. So if you're going for a job, particularly a social media job, everything that you do online has to pretty much fit in with what you're going to put in your CV when you apply for that particular job. So if, for instance, you're going to work for Greenpeace and all your posts are for championing perhaps the Shell Corporation or Exxon, well, you might have a slightly hard case getting that particular job. And I know this is an extreme example I gave, but it's an easy one.
Karen, you have a sub-question to that. You want to add that?
No, don't go there.
No, okay, great, no problem. So yeah, that's excellent. And what comes up from that is the idea of that I want to take from another friend, Andy Beal, that kind of his book Rect. I'm trying to network you together with him, and the idea of really intentional transparency, but also I guess David, when it comes to me, there's a very lazy part of me that complains a lot that I'm not sure I want on the front stage, not just for others, but for me. So, what I learned when the word transparency came out is a lot of people thought it was a blank check to whine online. And so I've got to say something we brought up before in our last hangout, but I do want to say I prescribe to a value-driven transparency and a commitment-driven transparency, not just an emotional whim-driven transparency. Now, that doesn't mean I can't have a bad day and let it out. But, I really do have a commitment myself, a core commitment to adding value to people's lives. And if I'm just complaining about my day, I don't think it's aligned. But if I didn't have that, then all you'd get is my what I'd call the Heidegger word, my thrown way of being. So I think that's important related to getting people to be social media managers and creating content online, that they need to understand that. Would you comment on that?
Yes, absolutely. And again, when we ask people to be themselves, you're quite right. Sometimes they think, okay, what I'm going to do, being myself, I'm just going to let everything hang out. And really, this is not it at all. Being online will have specific intentions and specific targets and specific goals, and everything we do has to work within that. And all of this sounds a little bit like a recipe for gaming the system. It's anything but. It's essentially how you behave when people are watching you. And we know from experience that if you're in a corporate environment or in a work environment, it doesn't matter how bad you feel yourself in a particular day, you're still there to do a job. And you're fully aware that your conduct has ramifications on your team members, on your fellow employees, and you sort of dial it down a little bit because there's no point in actually getting them affected adversely. It should be no different to social media. It should be no different to an online environment. Certainly, we can complain about a bad day we're having because we're all human. But if that's all you're doing constantly, and then you think that's okay, well, the answer to that is it isn't. All you're doing is you're being self-indulgent and petulant and even spoiled, we could say. Social media is not there for you to just complain constantly just because it makes you feel better. It's not a place where you come to decompress, especially, but it is a place where you come to create value and receive value back in return, almost like a properly managed work environment. So, you know, we all have a duty when we're online to keep that in mind, that it is essentially a very transparent, hyper-connected medium. We are being watched all the time, and our behavior is there on record, so it doesn't go away. So really, we should behave in a way that fits in with our values without sort of showing possibly the worst side of ourselves, which we all have from time to time.
Very good. So along with that, one of the challenges that we have learned over the years and hear from the students in the class is the challenge of getting content so that they can put it out there, so they aren't just making things up. And you know, my view is everything from get their attention with how great it'll be, to build a future that scares them so bad they'll start generating real content. And different people need different things, you know, the move away from or towards, using a term from NLP, and so I'd love your views on that, because that's, to me, we've got a semantic search system that's looking for what is the real voice, what is the real character, what is the collective conversation going on there, and they're having a problem trying to get stuff out. It's very tempting to just crank noise out. So would you comment on any advice for the person you know, getting into the field and trying to get the content out?
Yes, certainly. Okay, you're right in terms that semantic search is always content hungry, because that's how it creates two things. First of all, a sense of identity of who we are and what we do, and secondly, a sense of context in terms of what we aim to do and what our intent is, which then helps inform search in particular. So within that, everybody feels a little bit of pressure to actually create content. And the moment you feel any kind of pressure, then you think, well, you know, maybe I'm not a writer, I'm not a photographer, or I'm not a videographer. How do I go about addressing that? And the beauty of the world we're in right now is that we're moving a little bit away from style and we're looking at substance. Really, what is interesting to us as people is what is really inside somebody's head, their thoughts, their passion, their ability to project those in a social media domain, rather than the slickness of the presentation. So rather than getting hung up on, I've got to create content, I don't know what to do, and I'm stuck here, I've got to create something, so anything will do, which is not a very good way of approaching it. You should always think of, you know, it's me, this is what I find of value today, and this is what I'm going to put out there because it shows a little bit of who I am and what I enjoy and what I like. And that something may often be work-related, but sometimes it may not. It may simply be something which you are passionate about, and it helps inform people about your identity and your likes and your leanings so they can get a sense of you. And frequently you will find that you get to the stage where you make a work connection simply because you were lucky enough to actually make a social one first, and you connected with somebody over something entirely unrelated, which then eventually down the line led into perhaps a referral or a job opportunity or a work-related opportunity. And again, this is the way we used to work offline. You know, we're saying that the online and offline world are converging. Well, they have converged in many different ways. Pretty much everything we did offline now informs in style and substance the things which we do online. And this is what we need to take on board. This is the mindset we need to bring to the table.
Very good, very good. One of the things that I made note of, I put down a few questions, and one was, what is your view of letting the public know who is the person speaking in social media? Because to me, Ford did this, of all things, early on in Twitter, where they used like an @ and an initial, and you kind of knew the name of the person speaking. And it was way ahead, in my memory, of other people who were, you know, multiple people.
Okay, let's talk about this. Essentially, it is a very good practice. Ford did it first because they have a very
Yeah, there we go.
a very highly informed social media manager in the face of Scott Monty, who comes from a social media background. He used to be a blogger, and he totally gets the domain and the scene we're in today. And let's think what happens the moment you actually use a corporate account, which is essentially faceless, to put the name of a person there. Two things are created. First of all, in the outward-facing interface, you begin to realize that you're talking not just to a company, but to a person, and that person has a passion. They work for the company. It's not a little robot doing the work. The second thing that happens is that internally, you begin to set transparency and accountability and trust within the organization itself. And this becomes the seed for it. And it is this alignment between the inner workings of an organization and the outer-facing world that it connects with that has to happen in order for it to win in a social media environment. Many times the disconnect we see in marketing happens because a traditional organization with traditional hierarchical lines of command and control tries to come into a social media-led environment and talk to us in a social media voice when it doesn't actually feel it. And then we get a sense of that.
Excellent. So it's funny how we'll still hear comments like, you should post 3 times a day or something like that, and I've still been driving. Yes, you should push yourself to get content out, but make sure it's really worthy of your customers' attention, because they've got the remote control and they'll switch you off if it's not. Is there anything you...
Well, yes. I'm very glad you brought this up, because again, it goes down the prescriptive path or the prescriptive model we are all being asked to sort of project and work within. And when it comes to social media, any kind of prescription offers us a sense of perhaps confidence that there are guidelines, but it doesn't really offer us exactly the sort of opportunities to work in an authentic way that we expect it does. So when it comes to it, usually the advice I give is that there should be no prescription to this. If you're in it, you should try to project yourself in a way that shows who you are. You don't have to publish something 3 times a day. You don't have to look at time zones, and you don't have to look at, well, what's my content? Is it going to be 80% work and 20% personal? Just make it flow naturally with 2 things in mind. You're trying to foster engagement, and you're trying to create real connections and build relationships and add value. And if you have these things in mind, these guidelines, then anything which you do is actually going to work. I think we've lost Martin and Karen.
Yeah, I'm getting him blanked out too. Okay.
Okay, so perhaps you can have a. Yeah, I was going to say you can have a question to go with.
I was going to say, does the Ford guy? I missed his last name. Was he before Matt Cutts?
Yeah, Scott Monty. Matt Cutts works for Google and represents Google. Scott Monty has been a blogger for a long time, and he's the architect in many ways of Ford's social media success, which has been considerable.
Hold on a minute, let me see who this is. Probably Martin. Yeah. Hey. Yeah, what other questions did you have? Okay. Okay. Okay, thanks. I'll hang up to control the noise. Okay, he just called in his last questions. David?
Okay. Fire away.
Okay, yeah. Is there any relevance to backlinks and inbound links? Are they still important? Should you still work toward it? Article marketing, that stuff?
Well, here we go. Well, yes. I mean, here's the answer. This is a qualified yes. Essentially, everything we knew about the SEO of the past hasn't really gone away, but it has got deprecated, and it has got filtered to the point that it becomes very difficult to gain. And we're now in a world where there are so many moving parts to any kind of online success that just knowing 1 or 2 or even 10 or even 100 is not enough, simply because the picture is too complicated to actually focus on all of them and try and game the system. And this is why we gain authenticity. This is why we're in a world where it's real, because essentially, you can still try and create backlinks. Certainly it will help a little bit, but it won't help sufficiently. And if you try to create backlinks artificially, the signature which you create trying to do that activity is actually going to backfire, because Google now is wise to it, and you'll get penalized. So really, you can create backlinks, but it has to be organic.
The rest of your profile.
Yes, and it has to be organic. You have to create value.
Excellent.
Sure
I'm gonna. Thanks. I'm glad I'm back. Sorry, my journey away. Hopefully,
that was backlinks. We didn't talk about policy.
Oh, okay.
And it makes you issue the USPTO.
Okay, you want to go ahead and ask that, or me, Karen?
You go ahead. You talk about policy.
Okay, great. The other thing is, one thing that we're seeing is the importance of having some policies so that they have some clear guideline, and also getting their ideas out of their values through this. But there's a balance between creating a policy that's so over-controlling they can't create engagement, and creating one that guides people to know kind of the voice and the idea of the business, but also minimizes real liability risks that some business have. Would you talk about that, a social media policy and engagement for employees?
Definitely. Well, let's start with the fact that any kind of company that doesn't have a social media policy in place and then still expects its employees to be active in a social media space is essentially playing with fire. It's only a matter of time before it gets burned. So really that sort of begs the question, what kind of social media policy should you have in place? And this comes back down to the answer we gave earlier about the transition of a company when it enters the social media sphere. Essentially, it can't hope to adequately connect with us externally if it doesn't really change to align its sense of values and trust and authority and information flow internally. So if you have a social media policy in place which simply reflects a legacy hierarchical top-down driven structure, well, that is simply a set of restrictions of what can and cannot be done, which are not flexible enough ever to deal with the fast-flowing and free-flowing social media world. So again, it's only a matter of time before we get to a social media crisis, and I see quite a few of them when I'm called in to sort of help sort them out with global entities, simply because they got it wrong. Gradually, they are changing themselves. The most successful companies have a social media policy in place which allows accountability to come in, allows alignment of values between the company and its employees. It sets guidelines for the safety of the employees and the company, but at the same time, it creates empowerment and a sense of responsibility. And the companies that do that are the ones that win the most, because they create the kind of structure and value set that reflects what's going on outside the company.
Excellent. One of the metaphors that popped in my head once was, are you trying to control the ocean or empower your people to surf? And because it's changing too fast.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I see organizations just clamping down and say, do nothing unless it all comes through us. And then there's long time delays before they do it. And some of these organizations are so successful intrinsically, where there's no competition, that they're still winning. So they don't realize how that's hurt them. Now, if the market gets tighter, that stuff to me would show up. Would you comment on that?
Yes, definitely. Okay, let's establish the fact that we are now firmly set in a world that is changing. The change isn't questionable anymore. It's not a question of whether it happens or not. It is actually happening, but it's happening at different speeds in different verticals simply because of that. The weight of the established businesses, the amount of competition that is there, and the pressure which they feel because of the change to their bottom line. Some industries are more responsive than others, because of the differences in that. So essentially, you're quite right. The companies that do not get it just yet, and they think that business as usual is business as usual, well, they will find themselves in a very tight space in 10 to 15 years from now. And the companies that do get it will actually have a competitive advantage in that same time frame. So we're heading towards a world which is going to radically reshape itself in terms of how commercial business works. And that, to my mind, is definitely for the better.
Good, good. The other thing that I'm noticing here is that a number of younger people excited to get into the field, and we have, it's interesting, we have, looking at different generations and how they flow is fascinating to me, because it's like we have multiple cultures right inside our generations, not just ethnic cultures. And it seems to be things like some of them believe what they need is just more schooling, and from my example, what they need is more experience. We've had a number that have come where they're trying to get a job, and I'm going, you need an example of working with someone so they'll hire you. You don't need more education. And the other piece on this is interesting with LinkedIn, which I'll ask second. Let me let you finish this first and not stack too many questions.
Okay. All right. This is a very interesting example which you shared just now, and your sense of it is absolutely right. We used to be compartmentalized. Every generation had its own way of speaking, dressing, working, the music it would listen to, etc. And it doesn't happen anymore. The boundaries have broken down. Pretty much you can get, a grandfather listening to the same music pretty much as their grandson, and sometimes they even dress the same, which is disturbing maybe, but it is what it is. And this is changing things extremely quickly in terms of how we perceive the values that we need to bring to the table. And it's also changing education. Now, essentially, we needed education in a formalized sense because we needed to establish a baseline which was going to allow us to have a safe entry level of competence into a business. To some degree, we still need that. But we know from direct experience that traditionally, the moment you left education and you entered a business, there was such a time lag in what you learned and what you needed to know that the business had to also invest in training you. The benefit to this was that because you came from an established route of education, you already had the mindset which was trainable, so you could basically, show or exhibit a shorter learning curve and greater competency than somebody who hadn't. All this is now changing. The online environment is becoming a constant learning curve for us. We can constantly increase our skill set and our knowledge set at very little cost to ourselves in terms of time and sometimes material cost, because we're flowing in an ever enriched world of information. So a business really needs to see practical examples more than just education, which they're increasingly are learning to distrust because of the time lag in competency levels. Which brings up a very question which I actually happened to be in front of when he was asked at a recent hiring. And it was for a social media position in a global company. And it was for a social media manager position, I should say. And the person in question was asked, well, have you ever blogged? Now, as it happens, they had done their homework. They already had a blog. They were blogging about the things which the company was active in. They also had a personal blog. So they were able to show that they were competent in that direction, that they knew how to project themselves, they knew how to get engagement, and they knew how to drive the conversation. And they got the job based on that, rather than the more formal qualifications they brought to the table, which I found fascinating at the time.
I want to ask you a question, because you fly all over the world, and you probably get to see some questions around hiring people in the social media and inbound marketing area. What do you see that the employers are looking for else in hiring someone? What are they out there trying to do? What are the needs they have? Because that's something Karen and I are always rechecking and reevaluating, so we adjust our course to train the people as best possible to be as marketable as possible. Some come from organizations, governments, agencies, but some are looking for employment as well.
Okay, the companies these days look for three things, and this is probably going to change as the online world matures and their needs increase. But at the moment they're asking for three things. The first one is, a digital presence, an established digital presence. So, if you're fresh out of college, for instance, you're going to apply for a job, you really need to have had a blog post, a blog which is fairly active, a Twitter account at the very least with specific conversations and a following taking place, and obviously perhaps a Facebook page or Google Plus page where you establish what you do and you establish your credentials. So they always look and ask for that. The second thing they ask is a knowledge of the differences between platforms. So somebody who goes there thinking that Twitter is the same as Facebook, for instance, or Google Plus is the same as Facebook, and the two are antagonists, which they're not really. You're missing critical points here in your evaluation of the platform. So companies need to feel confident that the person coming on board actually is aware of that. And the third thing is they want to see an alignment of values in terms of the content you create, which shows to the company that you actually get, in part at least, the conversation they want to engage their customer base in. So it comes back down to that very obvious example I gave about somebody applying to Greenpeace while they're blogging about petrol-fired engines. You need basically to show that you buy into the value set, and for them, seeing the effort that goes into creating content and starting online conversations along that direction is a clear sign that you actually do.
So I want to bring up a platform that didn't come out of your mouth in that, and it wasn't deliberate, but it's LinkedIn. Because yes. I really thank you so much for sharing a little post on why did they create Google Plus. But the piece I loved, the first comment was, do you notice? I mean, sort of like almost why did he post it over there on LinkedIn? And I want to talk about that because as someone who wrote an earlier book on LinkedIn and then really loves Google Plus, I'd like to contrast those two because that's something I don't see as clearly distinguished and really important in our class. We just spend time, we're going to spend some time in the class going over Google Plus, but also LinkedIn, because to me, I'll be real clear, my bias is a school shouldn't be allowed to be accredited if their freshmen aren't on LinkedIn first. So I want to talk to you about that, and David, I'd love for you to disagree with my views on it, but you've got 300 million business professionals, and in my years of training, the more conservative are safer in setting up LinkedIn with money than often the others. So if you want to be where the people have the more conservative money that can hire you, that's where I'd start for networking, and I'd like to get your views on that, and I'll add my term. I've used LinkedIn as business professional and Google Plus more as business casual to a little casual, but not, reckless casual. So yes. What's your views on that? And again, please feel free to disagree.
All right. Let's start with LinkedIn and understand what it is. Essentially, LinkedIn is a social network which allows you to project your very specific business identity and skill set to people usually mostly best situated to hire your services. And you also get to interface with similar professionals. Now, LinkedIn in many ways is nothing more different to an offline business club or an offline networking breakfast club or anything like that. So it works in very much the same way. I must add here that it's also pretty transparent to Google, and what you do there in terms of activities, postings, and connections is evident to it, and you benefit from that. Now, Google Plus superficially could work as a LinkedIn substitute. It certainly could do that, and it could work in the same way. But Google Plus does a lot more than just that. It informs search directly. It informs your profile in terms of experience and expertise and authority in search at a semantic level, which LinkedIn doesn't do as easily. And Google Plus allows you to enter in many more nuanced conversations and threads, bring in other experts in, tag them in, create and broaden the connection in a way, again, that LinkedIn doesn't. Now, obviously, to benefit from that in that way, you need to use Google Plus that way, which means a greater investment in terms of time and understanding and certainly connections. If your say the investment of time and effort you put into the two platforms is equal, and perhaps even your expertise of each platform is equal, then you will probably professionally benefit more from LinkedIn than you do from Google Plus. But I don't use Google Plus like that. I use it to its fullest capability, and as a result, I enjoy a greater advantage in terms of visibility in Google search than I would if I just used LinkedIn or used Google Plus just like LinkedIn. And from my perspective, that is a greater advantage in terms of the benefits I get, because 80% of the people who find me go through Google search. They also look there for social proof, and certainly the projects which come my way have come because of Google search rather than LinkedIn. Having said that, I consciously know that personally, again, I underuse the capability of LinkedIn simply because, like everybody else, I've only got 24 hours to my day, and I've got to make a choice of where to actually throw my weight, and I have consciously thrown my weight into Google Plus because apart from the benefits, I simply like it. I like the interaction, so there's personal preference there as well.
Well, you know, one of the things we teach is treating them like gears moving at different rates. And LinkedIn to me is a slower moving gear that needs attention, but not as often as like the dialogue that can exist in Google Plus. Now, I got to tell you, I'm Google Plus on a daily basis because I just love the way it works, and there are more people talking about things that interest me than they sneezed in their cornflakes or something. It could be on other platforms. And, but the thing that to me is another piece of LinkedIn that's misunderstood is you have a tool for taking the idea of 6 degrees of separation and getting it shorter, and I see it more as a networking tool and a reputation enhancer. Now, you still got to have the goods to back it. That doesn't have to move quite as fast as other platforms, but you know, get the content on there. And sometimes we hear people that say they treat it more like a resume than a first digital impression of you. In fact, I'm of the opinion to have it written the summary in first person personally, unless you meet people and go, "Oh, David, it's very good to meet Martin Brossman," and you speak in third person. So flesh out that content going back as far as possible, because I had one sales guy call me and say, "What's a hologram?" because I taught holography in high school, and he was playing with me. I defined it, and he hired me as a coach, you know, because he looked at that. So that's, to me, I think there's kind of, you know, the bias, well, you know, I'm on Google Plus or the other, instead of going, I can be pieces and adjust them in time as well. Anything you want to add? And then I want to bring up Pinterest before we get out of here, too. That's another one I noticed.
Yes. Okay. Again, I mean, your assessment of LinkedIn is pretty accurate, really. The only thing I would say is that in terms of global reputation building in search and how Google assesses what you do overall, LinkedIn is only a small part, or relatively small part of it. And the reason for that is because essentially the way that LinkedIn is set up, it is still gameable to a certain extent. And what do I mean by that? Well, suppose I put in my profile a sentence that, you know, I do SEO to a very particular degree, very specific, etc. And then I sort of go and link up with, you know, with SEO companies or SEO professionals. Well, what I'll have done then is I'll have created a digital network which corroborates what I do relatively easily, and without any real substance there. I mean, people just usually connect with you because it's opportunistic. They don't know, you know, who you are really, and, you know, they think, okay, the opportunity is there. So in terms of that, because of the ease with which it can be created, the relative value of it is certainly smaller than something within Google+, where the value which you get in terms of what you do doesn't really depend just on the connections you have created, but on the interaction, engagement, and subsequent contact with the people who are relative to what you do. And that, again, is very much like real life. I mean, you know, if you're a doctor and you're eminent in your field, well, you're more likely to have other doctors who are eminent in a particular or related field talk to you and have conversations with you than, let's say, car mechanics who don't know anything about medicine. So that is the greater value and the distinction that where Google Plus plays a greater role. And Pinterest, well, Pinterest is the latest evolution of the visual web. Certainly, as people, we are very visual animals, And in a very fast-flowing web, a picture is a semantically dense environment, which allows us to do many different things. We can decode it at very many different levels, from the purely recreational to something which is great in terms of identity formation and marketing. Pinterest plays directly into that. It's almost semantic in its search, in its setup, because essentially it allows us to group certain themes on our boards and create ontologies of that. And they also go to form our digital identity. It is still, it's still relatively transparent to Google, so activity there helps. It's just yet another platform to actually find an audience in and work. And the trick with all this from a marketing perspective is that it is it's very easy to jump into every platform available and simply have a presence there, but it is very tricky to actually form engagement and relationships of value within that platform. And for the value to actually arise, you need to have a very clear idea of what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, good. Karen's the one that really's been kind of my mentor with Pinterest, because I saw the SEO. I saw like people coming to a website with and staying on it like 10 minutes from Pinterest versus others, and that's what grabbed my attention
Yes.
from it. And also her point of how it is Google is trying to give us one answer, while Pinterest is a great tool when we aren't looking for one answer. Like someone looking for their wedding outfit and attire. They're not looking for just one answer. So it's really interesting how in some ways it fills a void for the right customer with social media. Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
I teach it as the other half of search. Google gives you the one best answer. Pinterest answers the questions that do not have a best answer. And there's enormous dollar value in questions that don't have a single best answer.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I mean, to be fair, Google also has exploratory mechanisms which allow you to find a lot of highly related things in a very precise way.
David,
yes?
Your wife did not find a wedding dress in Google.
Well, I think that we must understand that the value that lies within Pinterest is twofold. First of all, it is a soft exploratory option, which is almost playful. And secondly, which is very important, it is humanly curated. So essentially, when we tap into somebody's board, it's been created by a person, and that's actually what's of direct interest to us. It's not an algorithm that has put it together. It is a person who has had some kind of ideas and intent and style, and that is always interesting. It's why we first go to our friends for advice instead of going, let's say, to a marriage counselor or a doctor if we have something wrong with us. So it's human nature, and Pinterest plays very much into that, which is why it's so strong.
But yeah, anything else, Karen, on that one?
Not on Pinterest. I am curious about Quora.
Okay,
Yes.
Yeah, please ask your question about Quora, because you're the queen of Quora that I know of. Especially when LinkedIn killed their questions, a lot of people went over to it. So go ahead, Karen.
Well, when LinkedIn questions closed, LinkedIn answers closed, I went over to Quora. I see you have an account, David, but it doesn't appear to be very active. Not the best use of your time, or just not where you want to play?
No, I mean, I love Quora and love the fact, and at one stage I was extremely active there, taking part in many different discussions. It is time intensive, so it's just dropped off my radar simply because I'm so busy. It's not that I haven't have completely gone off it. I haven't. I totally love the interaction that actually happens in some of the threads, but in terms of the value that it gives to me specifically in what I do, it is relatively low. So it is almost like a play area, which is a little bit indulgent for me. I like the human element interaction there, and I have extremely little time these days. And unfortunately, this is one of the things that's dropped low in my priorities until I find the time to get back there.
Does it play in the semantic search world? Is it transparent, open to Google?
Yes, it is,
You
and
know?
yes, it does. Certainly, it helps. It helps inform the identity we have. It helps inform what we do and who we do it with, and all the contacts. In some ways, it's almost corroborative to what happens within Google Plus. So if you have a very strong Google Plus engagement, then it seems a little bit not the best use of the time you have left to actually go back into Quora and try and duplicate that in terms of effort. So if you're back there because, well, you connect with the people and you connect with the environment, which is certainly unique and very, very valuable. But, you know, like I said, for me personally, it simply has dropped in priorities.
Well, excellent. Well, I want to kind of honor our time. We blocked out an hour for this, and I wanted to, first of all, I just want to thank Karen for joining, thank David Amerland for joining. Please look up his books on Amazon. He's got a new book on Hangouts. Also want to thank NC State Technology Training Solution and Holly Basso, who's our host of teaching our certification program there, and I certainly got good validation and support, and hopefully we're going to have this required watching of all our students to learn more of thinking in terms of really this idea of how do we bring the authentic voice of the business out. So David, I'd love for you to, any closing comments to our social media management participants, trainers that are working to either enhance the business they're in or enhance their career by adding it.
Yes, well, what I'll say is that social media is going to keep on changing. We've only seen just the beginning of it, and it becomes very complicated to actually analyze and try to integrate technically. So the easiest way to do this is just embrace it, make it part of your life, make it part of who you are, and that usually becomes the best guide in moving forward safely within it.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks, Karen, and may this, and thanks to all the people watching and commenting. I wasn't able to mention them all because I don't multitask as well, but I want to tell everyone I read their reviews. Let's continue the conversation online, and David, you've been kind enough to come on. How can they learn more about you and connect to you?
You can certainly follow me within Google Plus, and I hope you do that. I put a lot of content there which helps a lot of people define what they do. And you can find me on my website, davidamerland.com, or look me up on Amazon, or Google search.
Yeah, that's right. You and I love just saying, just Google me, you know, and that we have unique enough names that shows up well. So great, great. Well, thanks, Karen. Thanks, David, and we'll be in touch.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Have a great day. Take good care. Bye-bye.